Welcome to another edition of Unplugged, and it comes this week with a different feel to what we had last time we recorded about 7 days ago, which was a season in review, club in crisis, what's gone wrong. Let's have a chat about the direction and the recruiting and the culture and the future and everything like that. And they came out a couple of days after we recorded that and kept Richmond to their lowest score at the MCG in 94 years, their lowest score full stop in about 60-odd years. Belted them by 40 points and had a very enjoyable night at the footy. Of course, that is one result, one game in one season, but it is a reminder of what can happen when you do apply yourself correctly and when you do get things right. And we spoke last week about you go from feeling despondent to feeling hopeful, and I guess as it stands this week, we feel hopeful, and who knows what happens come Sunday. But it does go to show, I think one thing that we were talking about last week is how quickly things can change, where a flogging can turn into a close game can turn into a big win. Not a lot has to change at this level when the margins are so small. So a lot can be said about Richmond, obviously, out of that game, but we were far more depleted than they were. We were out of form coming in, and they kicked 2 goals against us. It was a dominant display. And it did obviously clearly underline how important the Marshall-Ryder combination is. They've played together 4 times this year. We've won 3 of those games and had the other one shot to bits before Marshall got hurt against Geelong, and probably would have won that with some conversion anyway. So it is important. Different feel. That was a genuinely... We've had some big results where we've won finals and things like that, but that was for a while, and given how frustrating this year has been, that was a really nice Friday night.
Absolutely. I mean, if you hadn't seen it, then someone said, "Oh, the score was 62-22," you'd go, "Oh yeah, good on them." But it's as you say, you just don't know what's going to happen sometimes. Dan McKenzie kicked as many goals as Richmond. When was that ever going to happen? It's just some of the weirdest things you've seen, and just go. It's just a crazy night, and a couple of the recent games against Richmond have been very interesting results. So teams always have these 1-2 teams that they have interesting matches with. You look at the Sydney West Coast going back years ago; they were always very close games. It seems to be at the moment we have a bad game against Richmond, then a good game against Richmond. It's toing and froing every time we play them. So it's it was a very much a pleasant surprise of what they served up on Friday.
It was one of those strange ones, and like you said, Parko, we spoke last week about how quickly things can change, and a week is a long time in footy, and anything can happen in 2 hours of football. If the team applies themselves correctly, and I think that was the biggest thing that we wanted to see, and we said that we want to see these guys, no matter who's out there, no matter who they're playing, where they're playing, when they're playing, that we want to see these guys play 4 quarters of effort football. And that's, at this point of the season, the way 2021 has gone for us. That's all we want to see. And, results are almost secondary at this point. And they did that. I mean, there was a few minutes at the start that they kind of looked a bit slow, maybe slow out the gates or weren't as switched on right from the beginning, but Richmond kind of dominated those first few minutes. And potentially we were probably a little bit lucky to even be kind of still in the game after that first 5 or 6 minutes. But following that, it was kind of, a switch was flicked and it was like a completely different St Kilda team. It was, they ran hard, they chased, they tackled. And it wasn't always about kind of dominating the numbers, because we didn't dominate the numbers or the stats. And in fact, we lost a few of the key metrics. We lost tackles and 1%ers out of those, there's really special kind of effort metrics. But it was the way that we did those things. It wasn't necessarily the volume of that, but it was the way, the continued effort, the continued energy, the intensity at the contest, and the way that they applied themselves throughout the course of the night. And it just wore Richmond down. It just continually wore Richmond down. And H, you said during the show last week that, you get a few things going your way and Richmond can kind of drop the bundle. They can drop their head and start to, jump off the deep end. And we saw that almost, 5 or 6 minutes in. Dunstan won a couple of clearances in a row, and all of a sudden Cochin's getting frustrated. Rewalt misses a shot at goal or drops a mark, and he's getting frustrated, and the arms, their hands are out. And it was kind of like we kind of got a sniff, and then you get Brad Hill, running hard and kicking long and creating scoring opportunities, and Dan McKenzie and Ben Long pressure, attack on the ball, attack on the contest. Not that they were fantastic players throughout the night in terms of skill level or anything like that, but just creating a contest and creating energy and that sort of thing. And all of a sudden, Jack Higgins kicked straight and Max King kicking goals from the boundary line, one on each side. And all of a sudden, things start to happen when you put yourself in that position. You give yourself the opportunity to start doing some good things and to start making things happen yourself and not just wait for things to turn. And that's kind of what we did after the first, 5 or 6 minutes, is that we put ourselves in that position for good things to happen. We didn't wait for it. We didn't wait for Richmond to kind of fall off a cliff, but we did it ourselves, and it was all on the back of effort and intensity and energy for the rest of the game. And regardless of where Richmond are as a team or as a club at the moment, they've won 3 out of 4 flags. They're still a top-class elite football club, regardless of the fact that they're probably on the way down. They're clearly not at the top of their game as they have been over the last few years. This is still a really impressive 4 quarters of football from us.
Yeah, it was, and it's I guess it's easy to say in hindsight. I mean, watching the game, it was still nervous, but it felt like after Richmond had dominated those first 10 minutes, that as soon as we kicked the first goal via McKenzie, we never looked like getting beaten from that point on. Just watching the whole game unfold, we're in control the whole way through. We kicked 3 before quarter time and then 2 straight after the quarter time break to go 5 goals up again. You're like, it's a wet weather game. They haven't kicked one yet, but we obviously saw that against Adelaide. So I had the Adelaide game in the back of my head thinking, well, we lost that and Richmond's better than Adelaide. But it never at any stage looked like they would get momentum and get on a run at all. I mean, I think Richmond was still either even money or favourites at half time. And I remember thinking, it just does not look like it. I mean, it's the same thing when everybody's saying that Richmond can win the flag this year. You're only saying it based on history. There's no exposed evidence, and there was no exposed evidence to suggest they were going to overrun us, but you were still nervous just on the fact that it was them. Obviously, when Dunstan kicked that first goal of the second half, but it sort of puts your mind at ease a little bit. But the McKenzie goal on the 3/4 time siren, the lovely set shot from long range, which was via a relatively soft free kick, but they got about 12. So that was the only one that we got. But yeah, you kind of knew you were safe at that point, and then Seb Ross put the full stop on it in the last quarter. But yeah, it was bizarre. Not bizarre that we won it. I think we were talking about that you could see that we might go okay. I guess it was just the magnitude of the victory that was probably surprising to everybody. And Luke Dunstan, really interesting. He's been back in the side for maybe 5 weeks, and he's probably been best on ground twice, and in the best another 1 or 2 times in that. We know he's limited with his disposal, similar to, say, a Seb Ross, but those conditions are made for someone like him. It's cold, it's wet, it's tightening close with contest. It requires someone that's a bit of a bull. And he is that type of player. You don't have to be particularly fashionable or skillful in games like that. And yeah, he was enormous. And as you said, Nick, he got under the skin of Cochin and a few others, and that was pretty evident. But yeah, when it mattered most, we simply wanted the footy more than they did, which was surprising.
Luke Dunstan is a really interesting one, and yeah, I'm not sure kind of where his career goes post this year. He's out of contract at the moment, and there's potentially some clubs in South Australia that might be interested in bringing him home. But you're right in that he's been really important for us over this kind of last month or 5 weeks of football. And this was kind of the archetypal Luke Dunstan game, right? I've been a pretty heavy critic of Luke Dunstan in the past, and I think that was more about how we used him rather than his ability. We all know he can play football. We all know he can win the ball. We all know he's a bit of a bull at the contest, like you said. But it was more about how we use him and using him as an outside player, using him as a long kicking, trying to hit up leading forward type player. And that's not his game. We know that he can win the football, but where we want him is in the guts, winning the hard ball at the contest, being able to lay tackles, impose himself physically on the ball, on the contest and on the game. And when he does win the ball and gets clearances, he's able to either get the ball out quickly to someone running past who's a more skillful kick or disposer of the ball, or he's able to kind of bash it forward and keep driving the ball forward. Not so much just kicking it long blindly, but able to move the ball forward efficiently. And even on the night, on Friday night, we saw his disposal efficiency was only around 53 or 54%. It's not great. It's not ideal. But what he did when he got the ball was at least when he was kicking long, and I think out of his 32-ish touches, I think 20 of them were kicks. But majority of them were kind of out of a contest, kicking long to a contest, not trying to hit up a lead and missing, but kicking to a one-on-one or a two-on-two in the forward line across half forward, able for us to be able to bring the ball to ground or at least hit the contest really hard and impact the game that way. And that's what he can do really well. But when we utilize him as a wingman or as an outside running type player or a halfback, even as we've seen in some cases, he doesn't have that ability. That's not his game, and he can be a really good player at AFL level if he's used correctly. And I think we saw on Friday night how he should be used.
As you said, it was the perfect game for him. A wet, slippery night. What's the key to winning a game on a wet, slippery night? That's field position. He just got the ball and put it forward every time he got the ball. That's as simple as what he probably should have been told on the night. Just get the ball forward. That's all you need to do. And that's basically what he did for us. There was no kicking it sideways. There was no looking for a player sort of out the back of the pack. He was looking forward every single time he got it. I mean, the domination in the middle, that we could probably call it a domination on the night. We won. If you look at it, we won at 67% of the hit outs and then 67% of the clearances in the match. So we've had the ball first 67% of the time in the game.
And he had 11 of those clearances.
And he got 11 of them, exactly.
Out of 40 or whatever it was, he had 11.
Yeah, 42 I think we got. So it's numbers that you go, these are fantastic numbers. Like a few of those clearances are probably out for the back line because I think the 50s ended up being, I think Richmond had one more. So to beat them in that situation as well, that there you're looking and going, we had the better finishing rate. We had the better, just using the ball better on the night. And you were talking about how I was mentioned about getting them frustrated and that sort of thing. Mason Wood's goal.
Yeah.
You saw him after we kicked that goal. They started the fight. They were in for a fight at that point. So they were going, we've got him here. I think they've started the break. If that goal had been the one at the start of the third quarter, not the end of the second, I think we might have gone on a bit of bigger run than what we actually had.
Yeah, that felt like the elastic band a little bit, where we'd scrambled 4 goals. We were controlling, as you say, field position, clearances, getting first hands on it. So the game was getting played on our terms. But we just kicked one. We had a decisive ruck tap to steal with a clean clearance. And then the goal was far too easy, where Max King picked it up, walked through 2 players, handed it off to Wood, who ran into an open goal. And that was the point where I'm watching the game thinking, geez, they've given that one up a bit too soft. And then they're starting to sort of snipe around. And you're like, well, at that point, because your brain's been burnt so many times, I'm sitting there thinking, geez, they better not lose this. Like, they're in complete control of this game. And I think I sort of tweeted something to that effect. But, yeah, and I had a lot of people talking, as is the want, saying, oh, you're even more frustrated now that you lost to Adelaide and Sydney. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, not so much more, because they were pretty frustrating. But part of me in my brain thinks we might not have got that response had that not have happened, if that makes sense. It might have been a bit of a turning point. There was the kick in the backside that led to it, and we might not have won that game. So it's impossible to say. Clearly, the Adelaide and Sydney losses have made it hard for us to redeem ourselves, but maybe that was the catalyst to get what we got out of that Richmond game. Votes, I imagine, will be fairly consistent, Nick, across most of us. Obviously, Luke Dunstan won the Ian Stewart medal as adjudged by a number of people. How did you see it?
Yeah, I've got some honourable mentions I wanted to touch on first, and there are some obvious ones in Paddy Ryder, Crouch and Wilkie, and then some, I guess, less heralded guys in Tommy Highmore, Josh Battle, Jimmy Webster, Dan McKenzie, and Ben Long, as we've spoken about. I think all played really important roles. in this game. I gave 1 vote to Dougal Howard, 21 touches, 9 marks, 10 intercepts, and played 100% of the game at fullback. Did a really, really, really strong, solid job on Jack Riewoldt and whoever went forward for Richmond and was barely beaten over the course of the night. I think Riewoldt took a couple of grabs, but I don't think he took any on Dougal Howard. I think he had one over Jack Sinclair in the first quarter. And there are a couple kind of leading chest marks, but I don't think Dougal Howard was on him for any of those. And I thought he was very close to best on ground. 2 votes goes to Jack Steele just because he's Jack Steele and he doesn't do anything wrong and he just deserves votes every week. 25 touches, 9 tackles, 9 clearances is a pretty strong display. And then, like you said, Ian Stewart medalist Luke Dunstan, 32 touches, 9 inside 50s, 11 clearances, 6 score involvements, 670 odd meters gained and a goal is a pretty impressive stat line. Like we said, his disposal efficiency is never going to be, 80% plus, but it's what he does. It's how he wins the ball and then what he does with it in terms of his effectiveness, regardless of efficiency. And he was very effective.
I had the same 3. I had the same top 2, but I gave an apology to Howard and an apology to both ruckmen. I thought even guys like Battle and Crouch were good, but I gave 1 vote to Sinclair. Thought he's been outstanding this year. He's been our top 3 or 4 players over the course of the season. Uses the ball really well, steady head. My knock on him 2 or 3 years ago when he started to spend more time around the middle was he doesn't get enough of the footy. I thought he was very neat when he had it, good user and tidy and made good decisions, but he'd get it 15 or 16 times a game. Now he's getting it 25, 26 times a game and really adding that to his bow. So you want him getting the footy. If you want 26 Jack Sinclair possessions generally. So I gave him 1 vote, 2 to Steele, who was outstanding again, and 3 to Luke Dunstan, who I thought was the most influential player on the ground. H.
And I've gone the same way as you have. Again, apology to Howard, apology to Webster. The back line worked as one on the weekend. I think I gave it to Sinclair for the fact that he found himself in some really tight positions at times and he got out of them and he just made it look reasonably easy. And he used the ball well when he was getting out there as well. It wasn't just a kick and hope. He was getting out of the packs and finding a target. His movement out of the back line and finding the target up the field was magnificent. So I gave him the 1, 2 to Steele, as everything mentioned before, and 3 to Dunstan, clearly best on ground. And just the goal to seal it was his best on ground was a great goal on the opposite foot.
Yeah, it was, and obviously Ben Long. A lot of the guys that have been maligned. I mean, Josh Battle had it 21 times. Ben Long kicked a crucial goal, had 5 score involvements, and players like that. Even Butler, I thought, who didn't hit the scoreboard, I thought his pressure was really good. Higgins did some steady things without getting as much of it as he has in recent weeks. Thought even Hill was tidy enough without getting a stack of it. So, and all of that, losing Jack Millings before the game started. Leo Connolly, I guess just a word on the debutant, because we didn't expect that. He's from Traff High down in my old high school, which I didn't actually know. I knew he was from down my way, but didn't know he actually went to the same school until someone texted me that during the game. But he had 11 possessions in less than half a game and took 7 marks. Before the game, he would have been ready to take his position in the stands. Then they said, Billings is out, so we've got to pick Caulfield, so we need you to be the sub. And then Caulfield gets injured, so a quirk of trivia that Nick Caulfield is named as the injury sub and then goes off for the injury sub in the match. Leo Connolly, I think, gets a really good tick for that, and I would hope they pick him this week.
I think so. Showed a bit of dash. Showed a bit of dash. Was hard at the ball, hard at the man. Like you said, 11 touches in about 30 odd minutes or something like that was impressive, and he showed that he can compete at the level. I think that was the one question mark we had on him. He's been pretty good at VFL level through the course of the year, and he's got a bit of a skill set that we lack in terms of foot speed and ability to deliver the ball and that sort of stuff. So I think we'd been talking about potentially bringing him in for a couple of these games that might not matter anymore. If we're talking about giving up on finals, and he kind of showed what he can do. I hope he gets another crack.
He showed to be a clean user of the ball, which is something that we're looking going, is actually could be useful for us here. It's a nice, clean, simple kicking style, and it was hitting the targets every time. So if we can bring some of these younger players through and they can show this consistency, that's what we can start building off even more. We bringing them through and giving them time. And I mean, as you say, it was only 30% game time, but geez, it felt like he was out there a lot longer than what he was.
It's interesting.
Yeah,
we talk about our recruiting issues over the journey, and we probably don't need to touch on that too much. But you look at some of the young kids that have come through and are continuing to come through. You know, Bytel has shown that he belongs at the level. Ryan Burns is getting stronger and quicker and better every week. And Leo Connolly last week, you know, these guys were not top 10 picks. You know, they were not first rounders. They're second rounders, third rounders, that sort of type pick. And you know, you only need a couple of those to kind of hit, and you're doing a really good job at recruiting level. So, you know, I think on some of these guys, we've got to start giving our recruiting team some credit for some of these guys, because they cop a lot of flack and potentially rightfully so on some of the misses that, you know, every team has misses at draft level and recruitment level. But, you know, these three guys look to be pretty solid ticks at the moment.
Cool. And just as a side note too, I was talking to a journalist that specialises in a lot of that recruiting on just doing a game at Moorabbin on Saturday, and he was talking about obviously the success stories of drafting Marshall and obviously going back in the draft but still getting Gresham and deserving to get a pat on the back at that. And he also told a little secret which people might not actually know or sprout when they talk about it. That's in the Jack Billings conversation. And he said, sorry to let everybody in on a little secret, but the Western Bulldogs would have taken Jack Billings had he have been available, even if Bontempelli was available. So it wasn't a stroke of genius. It was probably a stroke of good fortune. But, they weren't alone, certainly, in that thought. And Billings has been a very solid servant who I think unfairly cops that far too often when we get even, I think Robbo tried to tie bloody Aaron Norton into that conversation this week, despite every club in the comp missing out on that.
We spoke a couple of weeks ago. I can't remember when it was. We spoke about that Billings selection. And I think what people forget is that Jack Billings was a consensus top three in that draft year. And for most of the year was being spoken about as a potential number one pick for that season and for probably 18 months before that. So, you know, this was not a surprise that he went pick 3. And Bontempelli, for most of the year, was a draft bolter. Like, he wasn't even really considered a top 10 pick until draft night. And the fact that he was taken at 4 was a huge reach and was seen as such on draft night. So, it's really easy in hindsight to say, you know, we stuffed up there, but Jack Billings was always going top 3.
Yeah, he was for sure. And a guy that didn't go top 3 in any draft, but was a very reliable servant of a number of 2 clubs in particular, played for 3, but found his feet at his second home, which was us. That is Zac Dawson.
Had a lot of it. Fisher got it from Montagna. And now Hayes. Hayes kicks a good one. It's over the top. Schneider's onto it. Now he's going to hold it up. Waiting for some troops to get back. And Dawson.
Little things. Keep on your feet. He bumped into Jamison, and Jamison went to ground, which enabled Dawson to get 20 metres clear.
He's only kicked 1 goal in his career, Dawson.
Yes, I don't think he's got the refined goal-kicking action.
But he's in the right spot. This is where they've been kicking their goals in the last quarter.
And he's feeling pretty good about his footy the last couple of months.
What an unlikely goal-kicking hero he'll turn out to be if it goes through. Never, ever going to miss.
What a great game. Yes, hasn't a few years and a change of Guernsey done a lot for Zac Dawson. He has found himself a place in this St Kilda defence in this what might well be a 12-game winning run, and just hasn't spent much time forward 50, but he finished.
Our next guest on Unplugged is Zac Dawson. Played for the Saints through the halcyon period of 2009 to 2011, back-to-back grand finals, or effectively 3 grand finals over a 2-year period. Came from the Hawks, where he spent 5 years in the system there, and then went on to Fremantle and played in another grand final in 2013 during what was a good period for that football club under Ross Lyon. Zac, thank you very much for your time.
I appreciate it, boys. Thanks for having me.
Now, I guess we'll go back to sort of where it all began. Obviously, you came via the Calder Cannons. Can you sort of take us through how you arrived at Hawthorn and what those early days were like? I know we focus mainly on the Saints, but obviously your journey that eventually led you to us. You got to Hawthorn at a time that wasn't great for them, but it wasn't long until they were on the right path.
Yeah, look, my first 5 years of footy was chalk and cheese in comparison to the last 9 years. Grew up in Moonee Ponds, Essendon area, went to Essendon Grammar, played most of my footy at school footy at Penley and Essendon Grammar, and split time between there and Calder Cannons, and got drafted as a 17-year-old. Back then you were able to get drafted as a bottom major, so I was under 80 kilos when I got drafted, wringing wet. That was probably putting a few kilos on what I actually really weighed, and was just a really kind of aggressive ruckman at that time. I was, back in those days, 198 centimetres was, Goodsey was rucking at that point. Jason Blake was doing a bit of ruck. So it was almost like they were looking for the ruckman at that size. And so I got drafted as a ruckman forward out of school and Calder after a big year. We won the flag at under 18 level, and got drafted to the club I supported as a kid. So I ended up living every kid's dream, getting drafted to the club that they supported, and walking into the change rooms with the heroes that you grew up supporting, like Shane Crawford and John Barker, and shared a locker next to him, which was a big eye opener right from the beginning. But looking back on it, at 17, it was just such an immature age for me. Like walking into a club, there wasn't much expectation on the early days, but walking into a club at 17, unless you're mentally prepared, it takes a lot to kind of really grow up. And back in those days, leadership groups and all that sort of thing weren't as massive, and so you were kind of left to your own device for the first little bit to try and grow up yourself. And I'd probably look back and say my first 5 years I probably wasn't at the level required. Whether I believed in myself enough, whether it was I thought I was working hard, but I wasn't. In saying that, it was an enjoyable period, and I learned more probably in that 5 years than the remaining 9. So it was pretty special.
Zac, you had some pretty well documented, struggles through those first couple of years at Hawthorn. Obviously, some big games with Anthony Rocker and Nathan Thompson, and then you go back to the VFL with Box Hill, and you kick bags of 4 or 8 and whatever in the VFL. Was that a really difficult period for you? And how did you deal with that kind of the external noise?
Yeah, it was difficult because, as I said, I got drafted as a forward and a ruckman. I was kind of brought in and played at that stage. I played reserves. So the twos. As a forward, I think I won best and fairest goal kicking for the first 2 years. And then I think it was the last game of the year of my third year, or maybe it might have been the last of my second year, that I played one game at fullback. I played on Sav Rocker, and it's funny that Anthony Rocker was where I had my worst day, but I played on Sav Rocker and he kicked 8 on me, and I was like, God, I'm not playing fullback ever again, And so I thought it was just going to be a one-off, but then due to injury, and I think Jonathan Hay was going through some struggles at that point, and so I trained the whole preseason as a backman, and then ended up, got a crack at it by the end of that next season, and played, I think, the last game of the year, and was playing pretty solid footy. And then into the next year I played the first 12 games, as you said, and had some pretty tough times, just because as a youngster in a different game. Back then it was very one-on-one orientated. You're playing on the big hulking forwards. I think you played at my first few games. It was Richo, Matthew Stafford, Barry Hall, Nathan Thompson, Matthew Lloyd, Favola. Guys,
small guys.
Yeah, just guys that they were pretty good. And so, and for me, I was still learning, and I was still very, very raw as a prospect, as a backman, and kind of got thrown into that. And as you said, Hawthorn weren't going that well at that point, and so I kind of was left to grow up pretty quickly and go through some pretty horrendous sort of things as a young kid should have to go through.
And as some would know, that next 2 seasons with Hawthorn, you didn't end up playing any matches for him, and obviously playing a bit of VFL or as VFL reserves, as you were saying as well, that sort of thing. And did you know that maybe the Secura was looking at you while you're playing the VFL a little bit, or did anyone approach you?
Not at all. I played those my last 2 years. I started to play quite consistent, good VFL footy, and it was just sometimes it comes down to a lot of luck and a lot of opportunity. And at that point, by 2008, they won the grand final. So 2007, 2008, the backline was locked in. There was hardly any injuries. There was a lot of continuity, and there was just no opportunity for me. And so even though I was playing good footy, there was just it wasn't there, and so I wasn't able to get in there and prove myself again. And so after 2 years in the wilderness, the club kind of just had to say, well, we'll just have to make a call, and probably at that. Looking back, it was probably the right call that they made, because after 2 years of going through that kind of torment during that little patch when I was playing, the mental side of things really caught up with me by the end. It was really hard to get myself going to grounds and going to the VFL and getting absolutely heckled and violated, having to relive those couple of games where I got manhandled, and it was like I started to question why would I want to play footy anymore? Why am I doing this? I'm meant to be living my dream, and I'm sitting here in the VFL just absolutely copying it every single week when I go out in the town, when I go out with the boys, and it's just like what's going on here? And so by the end of the 5th year, I was just mentally worn down, and so when it got to that point that I was delisted, it was almost a sense of relief at that point. So it's weird. As weird as it sounds, like it was really like a pressure release at that point, and that's how bad it had gotten. And so it was a real turning point.
I think that's a massive eye opener for people as well. When people make their comments on social media or they go to the footy and yell over the fence, that you are talking to real people. It's remarkable how quickly that changed for you. I mean, you not taken in the national draft, you go in the rookie draft to St Kilda at pick 13, and then you play round 1 and you effectively play every game. I think you missed 2 through suspension, but basically from start all the way through in that first year, your first game for the Saints is against Sydney. We don't lose until obviously round 20 of that particular season. So can you take us through that transformation from basically rock bottom after Hawthorn, getting the call from the Saints, and then basically not looking back as a defender the whole way through?
Yeah, it was definitely a sliding doors moment in my life. As you said, like I was ready to move on. I was ready to focus on a much more positive part of my life, because I've always studied. I've always had a passion to improve myself off field. So I was always studying the whole time. So I was ready to kind of go, all right, well, let's get back to uni. Let's graduate. Let's finish my degree. Start feeling good about myself, because footy wasn't giving me that satisfaction anymore. And so I was comfortable with that decision. I was disappointed, but I was comfortable that it was probably the best thing for my mental state at that time. And had signed up back into uni, re-enrolled, and was ready to go, and then got a phone call, of a random number one day, and it was Ross. And I picked up the phone, and I was like, pretty much, what do you want? I had no idea why I'd be ringing, and he's like, Steve Silvani and I have been having discussions, and we want to bring you in and have a chat and see where your head's at and what you're thinking and whether you'd be interested in playing footy next year. And in no uncertain terms, I pretty much said, no, I'm not interested anymore. I'm kind of got to the point where I'm mentally checked out. And I think he was a bit like taken aback that I was saying no. But left it at that. And he's like, well, he goes, how about I'll call you back in a week's time, speak to mum and dad, and I'll give you a call in a week and just see where you're at. He goes, but the offer's there, and we want to, we think there's something there, and left it with me. And so I kind of then had a decision to make again. I was like, well, do I want to go back into, as a rookie? Back then there was no guarantees to play. So you're sitting behind, the senior list, and the only way you can play is through long-term injury. So I could have just been submitting myself to another year of just not playing and uncertainty and wasting, not finishing my degree and not getting on to that next chapter. So that was where, as I said, it was a sliding doors moment to go, well, what do I want to do? And mum and dad were probably the big ones in saying, like, in 20 years' time, if you don't say yes to this, you're always going to be one of those guys sitting in the pub or, having a meal with the boys saying, I could have been this and I could have tried this if I had just said yes. But you don't want to be that person. And so when they laid it out like that, I was like, it's definitely the right decision. And if I don't have a crack at it, I'd be disappointed in myself down the track. So, he called back a week later, and I pretty much said I'm in. And from that point, got me into the footy club. Had some pretty serious one-on-one meetings with him, just between the two of us, and it was opening up and he was pretty clear in making me understand why I didn't make it and what my deficiencies were, and not trying to spin any bullcrap with me and say, no, this is where you went wrong and this is what you need to understand and this is where you have to get better. And so really clear on where my growth areas were, which is what I probably needed, and to have the raw truth hit home right from the beginning. And I think when I opened right up to him and told him everything, I think he was a bit taken aback, like, well, I'm fully invested. I'm willing to tell you everything. There's no BS with me. There's no lies, which he would have known because I've probably overindulged. And from that point, that's probably why we still have a good relationship now, is that I was always completely transparent with him the whole way through. And then as you said, like I went into that pre-season really focused on just building my body, being positive, and just having a real crack at throw at the stumps. And so I went back and trained hard, put on a fair bit of size over that summer, and then went into pre-season feeling really good, played quite well in the pre-season games. And then the last game, I think we went to Port Adelaide, and I think Maxie Hutchinson did his calf in that last game, like a pretty bad one. It was like an 8-weeker maybe. And another moment is the opportunity. It was like, that's the moment where things changed, and got the call up, played round one. And as you said, the rest is history. We kind of went on a really serious run, and I felt like I had a lot of impact in terms of coming from Hawthorn at that point, bringing across their defensive structure. I felt really comfortable in helping Ross implement his. And so at that point, our defensive system was as good as anyone's. And so I think that's what really helped integrate me really quickly.
At the end of that year, obviously St Kilda played Collingwood in a qualifying final, and you got, I guess, a bit of a chance at revenge on Anthony Rocker, and I think you probably kept him to 5 or 6 touches and just 1 or 2 goals. Was there a moment during that season or that game or over that period that you kind of felt like you finally, you were vindicated in making that decision? You were finally comfortable at the level?
I'd like to say yes, but probably not. I don't think I ever felt comfortable for one game in my career. I always felt like I didn't want to let myself feel comfortable, but I also never... I always knew that there was areas for growth, and I always knew my deficiencies as a player. So I just focused on really making sure that I was the best teammate as I could be, and supporting the guys around me and trying to make my teammates the best player on the ground every week. And that was my main focus every single week. And I think that's what really helped me
Speaking of kicking goals, as you said, you're recruited as a forward ruckman and didn't kick a lot of goals yourself over your career, but you had one particular Monday night early on for the club that you've snuck down the forward line and managed to kick the sealer.
Yeah.
What was the inspiration behind leaving the back line and going and sneaking down and pinching the win for us?
I think it was at that point Carlton were quite a small team, a small forward line, and I think they'd gone really small to try and use that to their advantage at that point, because I think we had a pretty tall back line with Chips and Blakey and myself, and we got to the last quarter, and Rossi, I got the message, and Rossi decided he wanted to swing me forward and try and pinch hit, and because I think I really enjoyed when we do train together with the forwards and the backs, or if we were as the backs and you pretend to be a forward. I used to love being able to play as a forward just for 20 seconds, you know, and kick a goal on Blakey or kick a goal on Gilbo. Like, get a lot of pleasure out of it. And so Rossi knew that, and he knew that I was, and got drafted as a forward there, had a history there, and he got the call to go down there and just try and make a contest and try and make something happen. And just happened to, I literally went to push. I was playing on Michael Jamison, who was a really good defender at the time, and he wasn't really expecting it. And I gave him a real big push in the chest, and he's kind of slipped on his back foot, slipped over, and left me 10 metres clear. I think it might have been Snides or Mini, hit me right on the tit, about 40 out, and never looked like missing at that point.
Wobbled it through.
No, that was one of I knew straight away. That was one of the ones that I kicked, and I was like, yep, that was done. That was in.
Underrated game of footy too. It's actually all on YouTube. It's one of the best games.
Yeah, it was a great game.
Game against Carlton. It was a belter. But that grand final that year, we've asked a lot of questions about the game. I guess there's a key moment that everybody knows about where you were obviously millimetres off being one of the great heroes with a tremendous intercept, and if not for the toe poke, obviously it would have turned out that way. But on a side note, how crook were you before that game? As I understand it, you'd been quite under the weather leading into that game.
Yeah, I was in a really bad way, actually. The night before, afternoon, and the night before, and the morning. I hadn't eaten a thing since lunch the day before at the parade. Wasn't able to keep anything down, fluids or solids. Was on the drip the night before, up until midnight. Got up at 6 a.m. at the club again till 9, and then at the ground. So I was really touch and go whether I was actually going to play or not. And you had a pretty serious combo with Ross right before the game. And he pretty much said, make the right effing decision, because this is going to, make or break a friendship if you don't. So if I wasn't feeling shit before that, I was feeling pretty nervous after that, to make sure. But in saying that, once I went and warmed up on the field and I kind of got that adrenaline, and I didn't really think about it, and it didn't really hit me until probably 3 days into drinking after the game.
Probably helped the guts.
Yeah, well, it wasn't ideal, but I was in a pretty bad way. But to be honest, I didn't really feel it too much during the game. As weird as it is, like you think that if you had no fuel in your body, but sometimes your body just finds a way, and there's more. Ross would always say you've got more to give than you think. So that was very true that day.
I guess without harping too much on that moment, which I'm sure you've spoken about, endlessly over the last decade or so, but do you have to remind people that to even get to that point, you had to sprint, 40 or 50 or 60 meters, kind of gut run to get to Gary Ablett Jr. to spoil that contest, even before Scarlett even gets to the ball. Do you feel like you're unfairly maligned in that moment?
Oh well, that was what I was proud of more than anything throughout my whole career, is that I was always willing to do that. And sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you don't get there. But I was always willing to help Jonesy if his man spat out and come off my man. And I put myself at risk to look like an idiot. And it could have backfired, But as I said, that defensive system that I was really comfortable with, I would always back my judgment to get to those sort of contests throughout the year and make sure, even if it's just making them earn a mark or just getting a knee in or getting some body on them, I would always love to be able to make an impact that way, and not just be a cone which is sitting in the middle and come off too late and let them hit it over the top, or it's just make an impact, whether you give a free kick away or whether whatever, you just stop the momentum of the ball and the play at the time. And throughout that whole year, that was something I really was proud of, my growth in that area. And so I was so confident in the moment that I never really had an issue. I never felt worried that I was doing the wrong thing. And I if it hadn't have been wet, I think, as I said, things would have been a lot different, because when I got there, I knew that if I had taken the body on Gary, I would have probably given away a free kick, because I got there just a little bit too late, and I knew that if I had cleaned him up, I would have given away a free. So I tried to go around his body without touching him, and because I had to go around him, I just got a glance on that ball, and I didn't get as firm a purchase on it. But the decision in itself, I'd do it 100 times out of 100 if I had to do it again. As you said, you're an inch away from being a hero in a game, which I'm very proud of. I took the risk. And didn't think twice about it. So that, as I said, look back on those moments and be proud of the decision that you make, not one that you didn't make. Because if I didn't go and we lose the game, we'd be sitting here and you wouldn't know anything about it, but I would know that I didn't go for it. So that's what I'm proud of.
They've had a number of players from that era coming on here before and giving us what they did, how they've dealt with it, and everything like that. Was there anything you took from that into the following season going, this is what I'm going to do different, I'm taking this and trying to make that better, or I'm forgetting that, not doing that anymore? Is anything that you changed and thought this is what's going to take?
Well, just going through that moment and knowing that I was in that moment and I could have made a difference and I could have won us the game, and I put myself in that situation, I took a lot of confidence out of that into the next year that, if that situation was there again, I'm going to make the right decision and I'm the right person. I should be on the ground. And I took confidence that I deserved my spot in that team, because I knew that I was willing to do what it took to make the hard decision to go, when I could be made to look like an idiot. So that was probably the one thing I took out of that game, is that I belonged in that team, because, as you said, I wasn't the most pretty player, or didn't get the most super coach points or whatever, but I knew that my role in the team was just as important as the next person.
I guess from my point of view, over your time, I think looking at the statistics, I don't think you conceded more than 3 goals in a game at any stage in your time with the Saints. So I guess, how proud are you? I know you obviously went on to Fremantle and had some success there as well with Ross. How proud are you of the transformation, and also the fact that when we talk about those finals, 9, 10 and even 11, everyone remembers obviously Goddard with the mark and Lenny Hayes with the Norm Smith. And when people say, St Kilda's finest players in those grand finals, they probably think of Hayes and Goddard. But I think our best 3 players were Hayes, Goddard and yourself over those grand finals. You beat your opponent the whole way through that period. And how proud are you of that finals record and how good you were in those big games?
Yeah, it was something that really gave me confidence when I left Saints to go to Freo. And we got into the finals run at Freo. That confidence that I took from those couple of years was really important for me to feel like I had a lot of experience and knowledge to share in those moments, because once you perform in the bigger moments, in finals games, that's when your real confidence grows as a player. Is it when the heat's really on and when the pressure's really on and every decision is so important? And if you're more often than not getting those decisions right and you're performing when the brightest lights are on, you're never going to gain more confidence in yourself and your own ability. And really looking back on things and people that still might be malign me in the way I played, I look back on that period of my career. And as you said, the record that I had in finals, and I've got no concern when people talk crap to me, because it's like, I've done it. I've performed when I needed to perform. I may have made a few errors and skill errors or whatever, but as a whole, I performed when it counted most.
Across the kind of 2010, 2011 period, there were obviously some well-documented incidents, and I'm not sure how comfortable you are talking about some of those things, but there's one that is potentially not spoken about a lot, and that's a tweet that you kind of directed at Robert Walls and called him a sourpuss. What's the story behind that?
It was probably, how long? It was probably 7 years of pent-up anger being released. It's probably immature, but as you said, like going to games and copying it from crowd is one thing, but then watching games back on TV and hearing commentators give it to you week in, week out, it really kind of grinds your gears, because it's like, you should understand how hard it is to play footy. You should understand the pressures that come with it. Yet you can sit there and go, oh, Zac, and my fault. He always does that. And it's just continual. Whereas I have to hear it from my parents, my aunties and uncles, my cousins talking about Robert Walls. And I'm like, I've had enough. And it got to the point where, I think it was like Channel 7 lost the rights to footy or something. And I was going to Bali at that point, and I literally sent that tweet and left to Bali that day and turned my phone off and had no idea what had happened until 3 days later when I turned my phone back on and I had like 80 messages from people saying, what have you done? So I literally sent it without thinking like there'd be any kickback or, I didn't really think it was too harsh, or I didn't even know if anyone would read it, to be honest. And to think that's what happened I look back and it's pretty funny now, but you just got to be careful sometimes, itchy fingers.
I have a two-parter. So when Ross decided to leave and he was heading over to Fremantle, was it early on the kind of maybe said something to you about coming and following as well, or going over with him? And the second part is, have you moved out of his house yet, or is you still living with him? Or
I'm in the granny flat at the moment, so it's nice and cozy back here. No, well, it's a funny story because everyone thinks that I went with Ross, but to be honest, Freo had contacted me during that year, knowing that I was out of contract, and I was obviously comfortable where I was. I was really happy and content, and finally cemented my spot in the team. And I was like, there's no way I'm going. So I just dismissed it and didn't think anything of it. And then got to the end of the year, that year, and was looking to redo my contract and all that sort of thing. And so I went back into contract negotiations. And unfortunately, at that point, we'd had a lot of salary cap issues. And it meant that it was probably 6 or 7 players. I think Shawnee Dempster, me, myself, Farron, I can't remember. And we were all having to take a little bit of a pay cut to be able to squeeze in. And at that point, I played 3 years. And as I mentioned before, like, I thought after 3 years of consistent footy that this next contract was going to be my kind of make the bank, be able to set my life up, be able to buy a house, and got to that point, and it was almost the opposite. It was like, you've got to take less than you were on last year so you can stay. And I was like I felt like I was an important cog in the team, and just wanted to feel like that was being reflected in what I was going to be earning and all that sort of thing. And I was really struggling to understand how it got to that point. And then during all that, my manager was like, well, you guys, that Freo was still in the picture. And I said, well, why don't we just speak to them and see if there's a deal and see if we can kind of use that as a bit of leverage with the Saints and say, well, we have something going on. This is what I can get paid here. And that was my initial thought. And so we did that, came back and there was a deal there. They didn't talk about numbers. They said it was going to be pretty decent and we'd be able to do 3 or 4 years. And so I went back with that. And I think they might have thought I was bluffing. And they increased my contract by, I can't remember how much it was, but almost laughable at that point. It was insulting, really. And I walked out of the meeting and I said, no, I'm done with that. I felt disrespected and hadn't made a decision yet. But then literally within days, Ross left. And I was like, what the hell is going on? And so I hadn't decided any way or the other way. And so when that happened, I was like, gee, what's happening? My head was spinning. And then within a couple of days, Ross rang me and he's like, have you made a decision yet? Because they've been asking me about you. And once that happened and I had a conversation with him and he was like, we could, do something special over here. And, I've got faith in you and blah, blah, blah. It was just like, he gave me my first, showed belief in me. And he was kind of like the guy that reignited that fire in me. And so it was very hard to not go and follow when I knew that that's what I was going to be getting when I got there. When it was Scott Waters that was just been hired, I think it was at that time. And it was very tough because I built great relationships with my teammates. I still love them to this day. And so it was a very hard call. And I just met my wife now. We'd met 9 months earlier. So it meant that I was going to have to leave Melbourne and my family. And it wasn't an easy decision, but, after probably a month, of really dwelling on it and thinking about it, that I made the call to go.
Zac, last one for me. It's a bit of a two-parter before we let you go, but you've spoken previously in media and interviews and stuff about mental health and the effect that being out in public and at events and nightclubs or bars, pubs, whatever, can have on you and the effect that has on your family and friends and other footballers, etc. Is there a message that you've got as someone who's kind of been through the darkest of that and the worst of that you want to, tell the footy public? And secondly, what do you want the footy community to know about you, about Zac Dawson, and how do you want to be remembered by Saints fans?
Well, I'll answer the last question first, how I want to be remembered. I just want to be remembered as someone that gave everything, that was limited in my ability, but I gave everything in terms of heart and effort to make up for that. I was selfless as a player, was more than willing to give up my own game to benefit my teammates. And that, more than anything, is something I want to be remembered for, especially within my teammates group, is just being a great teammate. And that was my mantra my whole career is to be a great teammate. And I got to my final year at Fremantle and I won the best clubman. And that was one of my prouder moments in my career, because I knew that the time and effort I was putting in with my teammates, it was being acknowledged, and especially even the administration staff, and because that was something I always did, and whether it was at St Kilda, Hawthorn, Freo, I'd always give time to every single person, and that's probably how I'd want to be remembered, as someone that's a great team man and a great team person, and someone that would want to be welcomed in any locker room. And that's how I felt, even coming back to St Kilda games in the last couple of years. I've felt welcomed because I felt like I put in a lot of effort in terms of my relationships with the club. So that's something that I really pride myself on, and still to this day, like in business, in life, in uni, like relationships is something I always will focus on, and having genuine relationships that way. And in terms of the mental health side of things, it's looking back on it, it's very lucky that I think I came out the other side. I think if I didn't go back into footy, and I always was carrying around the stigma, the Anthony Rocker, getting belted up as a young kid and blah blah blah, and I never had a chance to change that perception, and change my own belief in myself. Who knows where my life would have gone? And that's the real worry, with the mental health side of things, that I wasn't willing to ask for help. I thought I could deal with it. I didn't want to worry my parents. I didn't want to worry my friends. So I kind of bottled it all up. And it probably wasn't till the back end of my career where I started talking about things and that you really understand the enormity of how serious things get and how seriously bad things could have gone, if I didn't get myself into a better headspace. Because it is damaging. Like living your life, and people, all they see is your super coach points, or all they see is someone's kicked 8 goals on you in your third game, and they think they talk about, people insult your family. They'll get on your Facebook and they'll send you disgraceful messages about your kids, and they think that this is all right. And it's all based on a game of footy. They don't know me as a person. They don't know me, the relationship, as you said, like how proud I am of the relationships I have with most people that I interact with. That's more important to me than anything. So I got myself to a point at the end of my career where the people that were giving this crap to me, I almost felt sorry for them more than I got angry. I was like, because I would always think, well, what's going on in your life for you to be sitting there on your keyboard or sitting there at the ground heckling me? And so I would turn it around, and rather than be angry and be upset, I'd be like, well, I'd almost feel sorry for them and go, well, I wonder what's happening in their life, because things must be pretty bad if that's how they're getting gratification. Then that's quite sad. And so for young players, and that would be my one bit of advice, is that it's how you take that hate and how you take the haters and what they're saying. If you take it personally, it's going to wear you down eventually. But if you turn that into, motivation, or you turn it into, you're feeling sorry for these people and kind of not letting it get to you, I think that was the biggest thing for me, to be able to move forward and not kind of dwell on the past.
Very good answer, and it's been great to spend some time with you this evening, Zac. We appreciate you jumping on. You played some terrific footy for the Saints. I think it was a great story of redemption for the club and redemption for yourself, and obviously you went on to continue to have a fine career. So good luck with whatever does happen next, and thanks very much for being our latest guest.
No, absolute pleasure. Anytime.
Zac Dawson there, speaking to us about his 3-club career that netted 166 AFL games, played in 4 grand finals as well over that period of time. So a grand final every 40-odd games across his career. We look ahead to Collingwood. I'm sick of losing to them, particularly given they haven't been much good for parts of that period. We beat them in 16 and 17, but they're the only 2 wins we've had against them since round 3, 2010. So it's been a pretty frustrating old time. They belted us last year in just about our only shocker of the 2020 season. Belted us in 2019 when I think we were in front at 3/4 time and lost by 9 goals or something like that. So it'd be nice to get one over them. Robert Harvey coaching them. Obviously, we certainly it does create mixed feelings around watching Collingwood play. And last week, I actually half wanted them to beat Fremantle for Harvey only, which was a difficult position to be in. It didn't work out that way for them. But no Darcy Moore for Collingwood, no Jeremy Howe, so their defence is a little bit restricted. De Goey didn't play last week, but he wasn't listed on their injury list from last week. I haven't seen this week, so I don't know what the situation is around him. We look like we'll get Billings back. We lose Caulfield for at least a month with that hammy. Apart from that, Zach Jones, I think, still another week or so away. So the changes you would think would be Billings, maybe Vitello. I think his 12-day thing would still apply. So we'll just see what happens from there. But, yeah, I guess fundamentally I'm fed up with losing to Collingwood, and it's probably about time that changed.
On paper, it should, when you think about it. And form at the moment, they've got to a point where I think they've really dropped away, and I think I'm not sure halves is going to be a little bit of experimenting to show what he's got in ideas and to sort of build his resume up a little bit and say, well, this is the sort of things I tried when the team was down and out and about and that sort of thing. So that's where you kind of got to look and go, if they're trying things, that's where we've got to try and step up and play our proper game and beat the team who's struggling. Problem being that they're a team that when they're on their day, they can really put you to the sword and turn a game their way very quickly. So getting similar sort of, I guess, situation to Richmond. That first usage is going to be the key. Beating Pendlebury, beating Sidebottom, not giving them the ball in the middle that they love to have quite often. They move the ball through the middle of the ground very smoothly, and if we stop them there, make them have to kick wide, that's where you can get on top of them. Because as we're saying, they're missing a few of their talls, they're missing some other players that really structure them up. So really having a look at those holes that they've got at the moment and exploiting them, that's where we've really got to look at them and beat them at. So very much a winnable game on paper, but we have to be on our game again for 4 quarters.
Spot on. I think you hit the nail on the head there. That we've got to do the same thing that we did against Richmond. We've got to win the ball and get first hands on the ball and deliver it cleanly. Because we know that Collingwood have enough talent, regardless of whether they're out of form or not. They have enough talent to win games of football, and they do that. They do it against us. And like you said, Parker, they don't have to play good footy for 3 quarters, but all they have to do is do it for 30 minutes or 25 minutes, and they can put you to the sword. They've got enough talent to do that without having to play good footy for a full game. So a lot of this, I think, comes down to Ryder and Marshall against Grundy. And you just don't know. You don't know what Collingwood you're going to get. Like H said, are they experimenting? Are they trying to win games of footy at the moment? You know Robert Harvey's trying to win games of football. He doesn't know any other way to coach. But in terms of selection committee, in terms of the way that they're building their club at the moment, there were some real strange decisions at the selection table last week. They brought Mason Cox back in, who hasn't been banging the door down in the VFL. Or in the twos or at training reportedly either. So they went in tall last week, which was a bit surprising. And you just don't know what Collingwood you're going to get. So if we put in 4 quarters of solid football again and solid effort like we did last Friday night, then that goes a huge way to winning this game of footy.
Collingwood generally defend. Their defensive numbers are pretty good. Their midfield gets a lot of the ball, but they're not always great by foot, and they don't score that heavily. But they don't get flogged either. They're a pretty competitive side. They nag away at you a little bit. If you look at their record this year, I sense their biggest losing margin would have been 5 goals, maybe. So they're generally right there. It's just whether they have enough polish to beat you or not. And I'm hoping the difference is we have a couple more avenues to go. We've got a little bit more polish when the ball goes inside 50. And maybe we're slightly cleaner on the outside with guys like Sinclair and Billings if he plays and those sorts of guys, maybe to sort of prove the difference. And obviously Darcy Moore and Jeremy Howe generally take a stack of intercept marks. Neither of them are there. Hopefully that just allows us to isolate them a little bit and sort of chip away. I mean, mathematically the season's still alive. I don't think we've seen evidence that we're a top 8 side by any means. It's just more we can't look to that level. It's just a case of, well, against Richmond you got 4 quarters of committed footy. You saw what happens when you do that. You've got to do that every week, whether you're playing Richmond, Collingwood, the Gold Coast or Melbourne. You've just got to be able to pull that out all the time as a non-negotiable. And that's even one of the things that Grant Thomas spoke about, the repetitive actions that are easy and repeatable and don't require huge amounts of skill. So this is another step. So you've had a good result. You've put your name back up saying, no, we're okay if we get it right, but it doesn't mean anything if you don't do it time and time again. So, we've got to get back to work and work on knocking off. You can beat Richmond and Collingwood in the same fortnight, and that's a pretty good couple of weeks. So if we could do that and set our sights on a tough game against Brisbane, which is currently scheduled for the Gabba, but we do know at this point in time that anything is possible. We might actually strike it lucky and not get them at the Gabba. We might get them at Ballarat or something the following week. So anything's possible. So we'll take on Collingwood. There are fans there. We obviously feel thankful for that blessing at the moment, given all 18 sides are in Victoria and we touch wood that everything sorts itself out. But fingers crossed we can roll the Pies. If you go along Sunday, enjoy. If you're watching or listening around it, go Saints, and hopefully we can celebrate another one next week.